This session today is all about fire and gorse. That unfortunately there's a lot of it in Victoria. I think the fires this year have been a bit not so bad, isn't it, Dan? But we did have a few. But yeah, gorse is definitely a huge issue for everyone or for most people in Victoria. My name is Anna Pimenta, and I'll be facilitating this webinar. I represent Landcare Victoria. I'm the development coordinator. And I'd love to start this session by acknowledging the country. So I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today and meet today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. In particular, the Gunai people, they are the traditional custodians of the lands on which I am today. And also that Landcare Victoria does take inspiration from the legacy of Victorian Aboriginal people who have produced food while caring for the ecological systems that life depends upon for tens of thousands of years. And with that, I would like to introduce you to our speakers today. So this webinar comes from a partnership between the CFA and the Victorian Gorse Task Force. It's been a pleasure to work with both Christina and Dan. Christina is from the Victorian Gorse Task Force, and she'll be telling you all about gorse in Victoria. And Daniel Itzak works for the Country Fire Authority, mostly known as CFA, and he'll be talking to us a little bit about the interaction of gorse and fire. Just some housekeeping. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Zoom, but if you're not, we do ask that in this session, please do not unmute yourself, because it will disturb the session. So we might have time for a little chat at the end. But if you want to, if you have some questions throughout the webinar, please pop them in the chat box. The one at the bottom of your screen has a little box there with chat. If you can write any questions as we go in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. I'll read them out back to Christina and then at the end of the session. And if we didn't have time to answer on any of the questions, I'm sure that Christina and Dan will be available, or myself will be available to answer them through email later. And with that, I'll hand over to Christina. She'll lead most of the session tonight. So thanks so much, Christina, for doing this. I'll just a little bit of a background about this. This came about as Christina will show you a flyer that they put together about fire and gorse. You will be sent that tomorrow as well. And yeah, it's a great resource, and that's where this webinar was born, actually. All right, Christina, thanks for coming.
Hello, everyone. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I present to you today from the traditional lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung people. I hold in regard their elders past and present, and those which are emerging. So woman, Jika, everyone, welcome. First, let's overview gorse, the weed we're talking about, and have a look at the legislation. Then I'll hand over to my co-pilot, Daniel Itzak, who we're very lucky to have here today. Daniel is the vegetation management team leader from the CFA headquarters, and Daniel will chat regarding gorse and fire and CFA's management of it. Then let's expand, and I can show you more management options that might suit your situation, and show a case study as well. Then we can have a Q&A session. So my name is Christina Boone. I'm a botanist, a teacher, and a weed nut located in central Victoria. My vehement response to weeds came from a young age from my naturalist grandmother and my scientific grandfather, who instilled in me also a love of wildflowers and of country. My grandfather always said, never step over a weed, stopping to deal with each one, a trait I'm now known for. So I'm the Communications and Community Engagement Officer for the Victorian Gorse Task Force, otherwise known as the VGT. The VGT started with a handful of volunteers who saw a need for better knowledge and resources around this incredibly invasive species. You can reach out to the VGT through their website if you have any further questions beyond this webinar. I'm hoping you get a deeper understanding of gorse from this webinar, and through knowing its nuances, can make better decisions around its control that suit your circumstances. So gorse. Gorse was introduced from the western regions of Europe because it formed quick, impenetrable hedges and was a familiar nostalgic shrub. It formed such fast and good fencing here that we spread it around, especially during the gold rush times. Declared as one of Australia's worst noxious weeds, it is listed as weed of national significance, and that's the national list, a bad list of 32 plants of great concern. The gorse plant itself is an incredibly prickly perennial evergreen legume, which can grow in excess of 3 meters high and wide. It is trifoliate when young, and when older, all stems and narrow leaves end in a sharp, waxy spine. The yellow pea-like flowers appear from about 18 months of age onwards. They can be born all over the plant at any time throughout the year, with 2 main flushes in autumn and in spring. Being in the pea family, gorse has the ability to fix its own nitrogen, feed itself, and outcompete other native plants. Its seeds are hard-coated, heavy, and persistent. They can stay viable in the soil for decades. The seeds do, however, need scarification, disturbance, fire, heat, or abrasion to allow them to germinate. In the meantime, due to soil processes, the seeds can work their way down in the soil profile and be obsolete below 6 centimeters of burial. So thankfully, the seeds are heavy, they don't fall far from the parent, and 99% are within 3 meters of the parent, unless, of course, the parent is on one of the avenues of greatest spread, waterways or other lineal corridors. Then the water or the cars or the train will tumble the seeds along great distances, disturbing them in the process and kickstarting their new strongholds. So please prioritise gorse on waterways or on other lineal corridors. Now to its impacts. So gorse infests almost all native vegetation types and our valuable pastoral land. In urban areas, it infests roadsides, railways, and waterways, spreading along these corridors, replacing vegetation. If left unchecked, it can form a monoculture in almost all ecological zones, soil types, temperatures, and rainfalls of Victoria, reducing needed open spaces. Its density and prickliness will limit access to your land, to recreational areas, clog up waterways, and displace native species, and undermine connected habitats. Gorse will increase your chances of having feral species such as foxes, rabbits, cats, as it's a preferred habitat for their dens and warrens, which bring further impacts. Gorse will increase your fire risks, as Daniel will let you know, and gorse will significantly lower your property prices. Definitely enough reasons to control it. And control it we must according to the legislation. So outlined in the framework of the Catchment and Land Protection Act of 1994, gorse is defined as a weed that all land managers, public and private, are legally required to take action against. In the Mallee, it is regionally restricted. Here, the risk is unacceptable to primary production, Crown land, and the environment. It must not enter. In East Gippsland, it is regionally prohibited. Here, it must be eradicated if seen. And in the rest of Victoria, it is classified as a regionally controlled weed, where all land managers must prevent the growth and spread of gorse. So what does that mean to the majority of us in the regionally control zone? If you or your neighbour or the council or Parks Victoria, Vic Roads, Vic Rail, or your Catchment Management Authority has it on land they manage, they must prevent it spreading further on that land or crossing boundaries. Preventing spreading means new isolated plants that pop up, ones on boundaries and ones on a watercourse, are the most important to control first if we wish to keep within the law for most of Victoria. Even better, aim at eradication. If you lived in the Mallee or Gippsland, eradication is the law. So how is this instrument enacted? A regional biosecurity officer through DECA has the power of enforcement. If you have a frustration with a neighbour or stakeholder, the right thing to do is speak to them first, as sometimes they don't even know they have a problem there. If you have contacted the land manager to discuss your concerns and they are not willing to cooperate, you have the option of lodging a formal complaint by calling Agriculture Victoria on their 136 186 number and lodge a complaint with a biosecurity officer in your region. The Country Fire Authority would love it if all gorse in Victoria was controlled. So let's hear from Daniel Idzak. Daniel is a vegetation management team leader from the CFA headquarters. I'll pass over to you, Daniel.
No worries. Thank you, Christina. And thanks, Anna, for having me and the invite to come along, and also the partnership we're working towards and creating. It's been good. Yeah, so Daniel Idzak from CFA. I'm coming from the lands of Wurundjeri. No, actually, yeah, Wurundjeri. Yes, I think I'm just trying. I'm not in my normal workplace. So I'd just like to pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and all to people of First Nations online. Could I just jump to the next slide then? Yes, so thank you, as I said, for having me. And so I'll be chatting about gauze as a hazard for fire, and also about fire's potential ability to help control gauze. But gauze, as mentioned, is a fair bit of a fire hazard in that it's quite a combustible material. So mature patches of gauze in a landscape can create a fire hazard. Patches of vegetation may connect vegetation within that landscape that otherwise would have separation between them. So this is, you saw in some of the pictures that were up, that Christina had up, just where they will go across a paddock or maybe a grassland, etc., and connect tracts of woodland, etc., connecting that manner. But they will also connect vegetation. So that little image in the corner there, of which might be an open woodland or forest gauze, will get underneath that and create connectivity into your canopy. So if a fire does get in there, you have a little higher likelihood of it getting into the canopy of trees where you don't really want it. Gauze also, mate, depending where you are situated within the landscape, may be a risk to assets because it does grow heavily on farms and could be around machinery, sheds, assets along that line as well. Might also be in risk areas along roadways or road corridors where ignition may start from a car or some other kind of ignition source, and that can cause issues of running into other landscapes and creating bushfires. The thickets of gauze can also conceal various hazards such as rocks, depressions in the ground, mine shafts, or fencing. So if, in the interest of firefighters going into to attack a fire or a blaze, they're going through area which did have gauze but has been burnt through, it's pretty hard to see what's in there, and it can cause a fair bit of issues on machinery, equipment, but also people traversing in those spaces. Gauze also can often be burnt when wet and green, so it's quite flammable. But this will often depend on the ignition source of the, that's in there, as well as the weather, because it will need a fair bit of weather to move some of that the fire. Some of the traits of gauze that can, as a mature shrub, enable it to carry fire is a leaf mass. It has a lot of oils which are quite volatile, and you can get very large flame heights, as you can see in that bottom left-hand picture. The leaves are small and they can preheat and ignite quickly. So a big thing around fire and fuels is the preheating of the fuels to get into a level where they'll combust. So very fine fuels will do that, which are always our biggest risks, which gauze has a lot of branchlets, which are in that category too. The gauze as a shrub can also often be open and sparse internally, so it helps allow the carriage of fire once ignited, because a lot of oxygen and air within that to bring the fire into it to then move within the plant and through the clumps of the plants. Also, potentially small ignited leaves may carry in the wind and start smaller fires, so they'll get up in a column or the updraft of the, as you can see there with that updraft of the flames there, and then move within the in that column and be deposited somewhere else. Not as bad as some of our stringy barks or larger Australian trees, but they can still potentially do that. I have probably mentioned a couple of times, but if it forms as thickets which are well connected, the fire can easily move through. So you saw some of the images earlier of it right across paddocks and outcrops like that. So once the fire's in, it can really move through there quite easily. It's quite hard to break it down as well because it's quite impenetrable for putting water on, and fire could be underneath too. They also are quite impenetrable, but that, as mentioned earlier, can have limited floristic diversity. So there's not much else in those gauze patches, and they have a consistent, not a continent fuel structure for fire. Sorry, spell checking, but that's a consistent fuel structure. So it's one of the same through the whole lot. So there's not much variation. So really, intensity is the same intensity you're going to get the whole way through. And not having floristic diversity, there's not much else in that area where fire spread or fire intensities will change. you can just imagine by looking at pictures and some of the others, the large pastures are very difficult to suppress due to limited access, but also they have a very large amount of radiant heat, so it's very hard to get close to do suppression on them. So they can always that can always cause an issue too. So that's just some of it as a hazard. We do talk a fair bit about. We'll touch on gores later and treatment methods, but fire can be used as a management tool for gores. But its use needs to be part of an integrated weed management plan, or particularly for a whole property plan, and preferably linking of properties in that space. Because burning gores itself is not the answer. It needs a number of other activities, which really any treatment of gores to eradicate properly, not one in its in its own, will be the the panacea, I'll call it. But gores can be burnt standing, so when it's still growing, or or in situ. So if it's cut and dabbed and laid down, and be burnt there, or it can be piled up and burnt as well. When you do burn gores in any of those manners, post-fire follow-up is particularly required. So this can be depending on how you did it. Say if you cut and dabbed or put in piles through herbicide application, be it through knapsacks or big rig sprays or boom sprays, or just off the back of a vehicle, etc. To capture any of the recruitment or seedlings. Or if it's burning in the standing, you can mulch the standing stuff, and then apply with herbicide spray. Just a couple of pictures there of machinery in operation in an area that has been mulched out. Underneath the National Best Practice Guideline, it does refer to the 4 parts of successful girls control program: prevent, spread and protect, reduce above ground biomass and kill regrowth, and then follow up for potentially 5 to 25 years. So I just have to really emphasize, even if you do use fire, you really need to do the fire follow-up. But one of the big things fire will do will reduce the above ground mass or biomass of the gores. Fire can also have some benefits. When I say that, fire can cause destruction of some soil stored seed. So there will be seed in the ground, which you referred to earlier, does need disturbance to fire up, but through fire you can actually kill and destroy some of that seed. Fire may also kill some, but also cause germination of seed in the soil, up to potentially further studies may be needed, but potentially cause germination of 50% of seed in the soil profile, which is a good thing. You'll get a lot of seed germination. So when you do follow-up treatment, you'll be able to capture the seed and treat it then, or poison it. If you want to really sort of deplete, you can do a hotter fire for greater depletion of that seed source, but that can impact the soil's profile. So if you are burning piles, is probably, for me anyway, personal thing, probably not the preference, because that does really heat up your soil profile because your fire is contained in one area. But if you want to deplete soil, that will definitely deplete the soil, but can impact your soil profile, fissuring, or volatility of nutrients. Just through the burning, as I said earlier, it can cause some destruction, but also promote germination, which will hopefully in the short term result in a large depletion of your soil stored seed bank, as long as you treat it so it activates it. And this can reduce your seed bank, or the depletion of this seed bank can reduce your work required in the future. For instance, if soil in the seed bank's 50 years and you've got a X amount of in there, firing it up, you could activate and reduce that and get it to germinate earlier. And so your timeline of management could be reduced, or the amount of input of its costs over the longer term reduced. And post fire, after after burning gores, etc., and burning anything, post fire can also encourage recruitment of other soil seed stores. So you might find after burning an area that has been covered by gores, that something else might fire up and come back local or indigenous to that area. Noting it might bring some other weeds too, but you just have to acknowledge that can occur too. So that's all from me from that session. But through the LVI and VGT partnerships, we have also developed a pamphlet or flyer that Christine will talk about, and will likely get shared with everyone. But thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, this is a flyer that we've created. It's on the VGT website. We can share it around after, but it does sort of summarize some of that stuff that Daniel was just talking about. So as we've heard, gorse is a great hindrance to our fire crews and a threat to your assets. So more reasons to control it. And if used as a control method, use it in a planned strategy and use with caution. Understand you will burn away your soil carbon, limit your native grasses from recovering, and set off soil set off gorse seedling germination. And I want to show you just a quick snippet from a little video. Lindsay Barry from the Southwest CFA region shows us how the burnt canes look after fire passing.
To combat the fire, depending on the amount of gauze. This poses quite a risk to not only the firefighter, which are radiant heat, but exposures that may be near the gauze also. Although some landholders may think that burning is a quick fix and an easy method to remove gauze from their property, we've found over years of trial that this seems to promote plant growth, and that the best method for removing gauze is either slashing or removal with equipment, then followed up by spray, and then continuing to monitor the situation through the next years. Burning gauze on your property can affect native vegetation and native plants, with the fact that it burns so ferociously that it heats the ground and then doesn't allow the native grasses to recover and then come back in the later years.
Yep. Sorry. So let's briefly go over the ways we can manage gorse. The methods of gorse control are broadly cultural, mechanical, chemical, and biological. What is proven the most successful is carrying out a few different control methods in an integrated approach and follow up. Cultural weed management is how we manage the soil, how one farms it or not. This can include planting competition, which we don't recommend until after 2 full rounds of follow-up. It's our soil preparation, mulching, and regulating the use of the land, for example, avoiding overgrazing. And remembering that gorse seeds will germinate from disturbance and won't germinate below 6 centimetres of burial. Mechanical control is concerned with removing the gorse, slashing it down, mulching it, or pulling it out. Mulching or cutting won't kill the plant, but it will get into a position of vulnerability for us to follow up with, and mulching will increase your access for that follow-up. Chemical weed management is where herbicides are used to kill the gorse. In some situations, herbicides offer the only practical, cost-effective, and selective method of managing gorse. There are many variables to think of when using chemicals, so speak to your agricultural supply store specialist about which one is the most appropriate for your situation. Selective or non-selective, and which one. We can't stress enough, always read the label before use. Things to remember with gorse: after mulching, it is best to allow it to grow back to at least 40 centimetres height before using herbicide. At this point, there is enough foliage to catch it, and using a good wetting agent is crucial, as remember, gorse leaves are very thin, waxy spines. The herbicide will drip off otherwise. Biological control is where we use living agents to help us against it. For example, crash grazing with goats, or relying on one of the number of biological control agents released to date. However, biological control alone will not eradicate the weed, but slow its rate of spread and allow more time for control by other means. Just a fun fact, gorse actually has the largest number of biological control agents released to date through DECA than any other species in Australia to help maim it and to control its spread. So just quickly, the biological control agents released to date are the gorse seed weevil, the gorse spider mite, the gorse thrip, and the gorse soft shoot moth. The combined impact may reduce the abundance, growth rate, and seedling capacity of gorse. However, they will not eradicate it. It is not a reliable method for controlling gorse. However, it can be suitable for spreading down into inaccessible escarpments. If you want, we can talk more later about biological control agents or other organic approaches that can help us manage gorse and prevent it from ejecting as much seeds. So how do we actually eradicate gorse? Again, carrying out a few different methods in an integrated approach and follow up. Typically, reduce the biomass, enable the parent, and prevent any seedlings. Or reduce the biomass, enable the parent, and promote seedlings over and over until the seed bank is exhausted. The actual recipe to this does depend on your situation, access, time, money, and size of infestation. If you ask me the best method to get rid of gorse and you only had 10 seconds for the answer, I would say cut and paint. Cutting and painting gorse involves cutting the stems as close to the ground as possible and immediately painting, dabbing, or spraying the stump with a registered herbicide. Stems can be cut with loppers, a handsaw, brush cutter, chainsaw, or secateurs, and then treat the stump within 20 seconds for the best results. That is the key, within 20 seconds before the stem seals over to protect itself from getting air bubbles in its veins or an embolism. So it's as simple as that, and that one is taken care of. This technique only applies the smallest amount of herbicide to directly on the target and kills the plant. We lay the cut branches over the stump to mulch that spot or leave them where they fall and move on. I find it satisfying and effective. It's perfect for along fence lines, along walking tracks, in hard to reach areas, and it's ideal on those new individual plants that pop up in an isolated area before you have a new stronghold there. Start in your backyard. 10 minutes can get rid of a few bushes and you can work your way out from there. But if your infestation is large, it can be time consuming. You can scale that up and use a giant cut and paint machine like the Eco Blade, which uses 2 controls in one action. Highly effective on woody weeds and only uses about 10% of the herbicide that you would if you were to spray. So it's an implement with a slashing blade where a drip of the chemical comes down on the underneath of the blade, smears out with centrifugal force, and then only applies it to the stems it cuts. So it only gets wiped exactly where it's needed. It doesn't spray herbicide everywhere, and it complies to that 20-second rule. So its efficacy is excellent. There are a few contractors in Victoria that run an Eco Blade. I'd recommend this for standard accessible infestations. It's ideal on regrowth and on patchy gorse, but it can be slow on massive infestations. If you have very large gorse with trunks, then I would recommend a fixed tooth drum mulcher to efficiently knock down large gorse fast. It will leave coarse, chunky mulch and still alive parents ready for follow-up. A flail tooth mulcher can be used to process the coarse mulch left behind by a fixed tooth mulcher if you plan on an organic approach, as the thick layer of mulch can suppress up to 50% of the parents and prevent the seedlings that got disturbed from emerging. Remember, mulching or cutting the gorse alone won't kill the plant. Come back and control the regrowth with the Eco Blade, or spray the regrowth when it's at least 40 centimeters high, or use goats or cultivation. If foliar spraying is what you choose to do, be it 40 centimeters high gorse or much larger, a selective herbicide is preferable so you don't kill the competing grasses around it, unless advised by your supply specialist. And once you've sprayed your gorse, leave it alone. Ideally, when your gorse looks dead, fence it and leave it to mulch down by itself for about 3 years, no matter how ugly it looks. The lignotuber below the ground stays alive for about a year or more. If you slash it within 12 months, if not longer, it is relieved of that herbicide burden and can come back from its dormancy and resprout from its lignotuber, undoing all your work. So the key here is patience, even if it looks dead. A different approach would be to mulch it down and then cultivate it in for a few years and continually cultivate it until the coarse chunks and seed bank are exhausted. Or another approach is to pull out the plants. There are a few devices out there to do this, watching out for seed bank germination following the disturbance. And on that note, please avoid bulldozing them. It just makes a mess. So eradication is usually always by employing a combination of management techniques. There are plenty of examples of eradication. It feels insurmountable initially because gorse seems so untouchable. But thankfully, as mentioned before, gorse is slow with its heavy seeds, and we can be quick to get the upper hand. This picture I found just a couple of days ago, just looking on Google Maps. So this particular property I saw, it's surrounded by gorse, and he doesn't have a gorse plant on his property. So you can keep it at bay, and so you should. And these 2 slides here, 3 slides, this is where my husband and I are tackling gorse over the fence. So it's on Crown land. and we would like it eradicated, so we're just working on it. And what we are doing, so the two photos on the left and right are the same spot, almost a year apart. He will go with the brush cutter blade, and as soon as he's lopped one, I'll come in immediately, and that photo in the middle, quickly give the center of the lopped one a quick spray on the cut stems with herbicide, and then we keep going from there. And so you can see almost a year later, very minimal regrowth. There are some popping up, and we'll go back and either cut and paint them or wait till they're a bit taller to tackle a different way. Now I want to show you a case study in the form of a video. It's a 7-minute video. I hope you enjoy it though.
The connection to this property is it's our family farm. It's been in our family for a few decades now. My husband's parents moved off the property a couple of years ago and nothing's been done. It hasn't been farmed for 5 years. So we moved in and we feel a really strong connection to it, and we'd like to get on top of the Gorse. When I look out into the distance across the farm, I see a blanket of gorse, which also is adjacent to state forests. So while it's a huge infestation, it's really important that we get on top of it to protect the land here in the forest. I'd estimate that we've probably got around 10 to 15 acres. There's always been a little bit of gorse down along that tree line because there's a creek down there. And so that was always controlled. But in the last 5 years, since we haven't had stock on the property, it's just spread. So before we sought out help from contractors and community groups, I did do some spraying myself, which while it was successful, I think I covered about 20 by 20 metres in 3 days. So yeah, it was slow going. It's
Show you up the video, Christina.
To be connected to
hopefully that's going again.
Support networks such as the VGT and Landcare organisations and their neighbours, because it can seem really overwhelming at first, and it's easy to just turn a blind eye and not do anything about it because you might think it's easier, but really it's everyone's problem. We're all interconnected. Our properties, are adjacent to a creek here, and so working together, it just makes it much more manageable. The process that we followed to find a contractor was we did a bit of research locally, asked friends, and then we went to the VGT field day and got the names of a few people and just, spoke to everyone and finally decided on the contractors we've chosen. So the works that are happening here today is we've got a forestry mulcher which is debulking all the larger infestations of gorse, and we've also got hand spraying for the smaller plants and fence lines in areas that the forestry mulcher can't get to. We're attempting to control the majority of the gorse, or hopefully all of it at once, because it's a massive infestation and we just really would like to get cracking with it and basically reduce the amount of seed that's going to be contributing to the seed bank next spring. So we just want to get on top of it. So the follow-up plan for managing the gorse is working closely with our contractors. So at the moment we're looking at a 3-year plan. So we're doing mulching this year, spraying in year 2 and year 3, and then hopefully we'll be at a point where we can manage it ourselves. Once the majority of the gorse is debulked, I think we're going to feel really inspired. We'll be able to sit up on the hill and look over a property where before it was just a blanket of gorse, so it's going to feel amazing. After taking this first step, we just feel so relieved. We honestly at one point thought it'd never happen, and now we can just look across our property and it's just clear and it looks fantastic. We're really happy. The areas that got sprayed were mostly the smaller isolated bushes, and we've done quite a bit of the fence line so far, and the plan is that we'll continue to work through the mulching, and then the plants that we couldn't hit with the mulcher will get sprayed. The change has been huge for us. We can, just walk up to the well which is our water source, and access that. We can access gates. We can use the paddocks now again, even in the state that we're in at the moment. So our fencing is showing through now, and aesthetically it's so much nicer walking around and being able to actually have a view now instead of being overwhelmed by massive bushes of gorse. We were going to control it all at once, and I think what we have done is we've been able to pause, take stock, talk to our contractors, work out our next move, work out areas we want to focus on. We're still determined in the next couple of weeks to mulch as much of the property as we can. We're probably looking at an additional 3 days that we hadn't anticipated, but it's been good just to be able to negotiate with them and work out a plan of action. The risk of fire was a huge concern to all of us. It's highly flammable, and as you can see here with the bushes that they're going to do next week, they're really tall, they're really dense, so they just would have been an absolute inferno. And now we just feel a lot more confident that it wouldn't burn as much and as intensely. I actually grew up in Melbourne, but I always rode horses, so any moment I had, I'd be up in the country riding, and I always wanted to live in the country, but I never anticipated taking on this much gorse. Having said that, I feel really satisfied that we have and that we're going to be the caretakers for this land. I'm fairly sure we've inspired our neighbours. They've been in contact with us and said they're really impressed with what we've done, and hopefully we'll see them taking action soon. It's been a big burden off our chests. It just feels like it's not this insurmountable task now, that we have given it such a good crack, and we've hit quite a big amount of it, and we feel really confident that we can get on top of this now.
Yeah, a great story. She's doing really well with that. I'd just like to recap some main take-home messages before a Q&A session. So, mulching debulks gorse fast, but won't kill it. This will only suppress it for a short time. It will grow back. This is the moment we follow up with a different control method. A combination of methods works best. Treatment for gorse is year-round. Mulch when the soil is dry and accessible, though. If you're getting a contractor to come on site, always ask them to ensure they have a clean machine upon entering and leaving, as this is a known source of noxious weed spread. After debulking or mulching gorse, it's best to allow it to grow back to a height of at least 40 centimetres before using herbicide, and use a good wetting agent. The fastest response with herbicide is application from spring to early summer and after autumn rain, before the plant flowers. Or alternative to 40 centimetres, at the moment of cutting it, dab the freshly cut stem with a registered herbicide within 20 seconds to kill that stump. Or use a giant cut and paint machine like the EcoBlade, which does the 2 controls in one action. Once you start treating an area, don't stop. Long-term follow-up is critical. Gorse is all about follow-up, and I can't say that enough. The bulk of the hard work is in the first year. Stay on top of it, and by the 3rd year, it's just the odd one. You can begin to revegetate in that 3rd year after 2 full rounds of follow-up. It's better to do one small section well than to spend all your resources on the lot and then not have enough time and money for that follow-up. Don't disturb or remove sprayed gorse or dead-looking gorse for at least 12 months. Gorse spreads mainly by seeds, so stopping seeding is key. Individual plants that pop up away from the main group and plants on lineal corridors, like waterways or roadways, become our priorities to tackle first. Walk your walks with your secateurs and your herbicide dabber bottle. You will slowly chip away at them all, remembering the 20-second rule. After disturbance, keep your eye out for the seedlings. Connect with your neighbour. Working together will increase your success. And remember, positive action has a knock-on effect. A councillor once told me that if you positively support the council's weed management efforts, it can equal a greater shift in resources that way. The same goes for other public managers, roads, rail, catchment management authorities, and the like. The other thing that increases success is to join your local land care group or other environmental group in the area if you haven't already. It is an indicator of success, and you'll have access to grants and other resources through them. For Gorse resources, head to the VGT website. We send out 2 newsletters a year, so if you want, pop your email address at the bottom of our web homepage to get that if it's of interest. And follow the VGT on social media for encouragement and to keep abreast of grant funding, which I heard today Agriculture Victoria has released funding to us, so we'll pass that down on to landholders. So keep your ear out for that process coming out soon. And if you want extra clarification or help to make a plan for you, please get in contact with the VGT and be kind to yourself. You will get there. There are plenty of stories where people have eradicated gorse. Thank you. Dan, would you like to add anything?
No, nothing additional from me, but yeah, apart from just it's a long-term game, so to speak. You can hit hard, so to speak, but you have to make sure you maintain. And I've dealt with gorse for a number of years and through friends groups and land care, and it is you think you're on top of it, but then just a few pop up after a number of years. They're still there for a little bit, but it's nowhere near the breadth of work required initially. But thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Christina and Dan, for such a great presentation and overview of gorse. I definitely learned a few things, such as I didn't know that gorse actually captured its own nitrogen. That was a surprise to me. I also love the EcoBlade machinery, and I did not know that you needed to wait that long after spraying, so to leave it intact. So yeah, great tips that I wasn't aware of, knowing a little bit of gorse. I hope some of you in the room also got some new tips and information on gorse. So we do have a question here from Tony Bratling on when is the best time to spray gorse. Christina?
Yeah, so in the spring and after autumn rain. So spring and early summer and after the first autumn rains. You can spray all year round though. In winter time, the concentration you need needs to be increased. So there's better times of the year than others. Yeah.
We do have, it is great that we have a little bit of time left until the end of the session. So I do think we will finish early. I also like to say that Michaela's video was amazing, very inspiring, I believe. So if anyone else is like feeling brave and wants to actually ask a verbal question, now is your time. We do have a little bit of time for a chat. So if you want to raise your hand or unmute yourself, you're more than welcome. In the meantime, there's another question from Declan that came through. And what depth of mulch is needed to smoother the gorse seeds and stop germination?
So I would say with mulch about 8 centimeters. It's below 6 centimeters of soil. Obviously, the thicker the better, and it will just the percentage of germination will decrease down. But 6 to 8 centimeters is what you'll be aiming for, if not a little bit more.
And then NF, maybe Nicole, asked if you know, when you said you're leaving the cut gorse on site, what are the advantages and disadvantages of doing that?
You Well, firstly, you don't want to spread the seeds, so keeping it on site. I mean, there's most likely so many seeds in that spot anyway, then adding any more is almost negligible. The only time you probably want to remove it to a spot you can monitor is if it hasn't set seed yet and you don't want to start a new stronghold in that spot. So the other advantage of leaving it in the spot is that it will increase the mulch and further increase the likelihood that your seedlings won't germinate in that spot.
It's a really good question here from Claudia, but before Gavin asked, he was pulling some gorse a few weeks ago and left behind some stumps and stems. He then looked closely at the stumps and they resprouted. So what should he do? Is spraying the new growth gonna kill that plant? Should he spray the new gorse? Leave it alone?
Yeah. So then if it's resprouted, you'll have to then wait till it's that at least 40 centimeters high to spray it, unless you can cut it and get the herbicide into the cambium layer, which will kill that stump. So that's the two approaches there.
And then I think this one might be for you. Which is a great fire hazard, the dead gorse or live gorse?
Depends when you say dead, sprayed or defoliated dead, if you know what I mean. If it's still holding leaf, they're both probably the same threat, but if it's, dropped most of it leaves and it's just the stems, it sticks, it's nowhere near as dangerous. Yeah, so, but probably I'd say the live stuff going over dead stuff that's dried, and a lot of the oils have dried out of the leaves, would probably be more dangerous.
Yeah. And this is all the questions we have now. So if anyone wants to raise their hands and ask a question, or there's one more that came through. Are there any government assistance to manage gorse?
Yes. Well, certainly through our community grants program, that's for private landholders, and it must be accessed through your local land care group or friends or group. That's an annual funding that comes through. We're always on, waiting to see if it'll come through or not. It looks very likely, from what I heard today, that it's going to come through very shortly. So yes, and what that is likely to be, if it follows the same rules as last year, is that we will match dollar for dollar for on-ground works up until a maximum of $1,500 we'll provide for you to control your gorse. And obviously that's accessed through your land care group, and each group can apply for up to a maximum of $8,000 for the members of that group to do that project. There's other grants and things that you can access through land care in different ways and different resources. So I highly recommend you connect with them if you haven't already.
Yeah, because gorse is a weed of national significance, so usually there are some grants available every now and then to control gorse. Yeah. So yes, Pat, this recording will be available most likely this week. And I will share with everyone that it's registered, so you definitely get it, and we will have it on our website. Any VGT events coming up, like the Blackberry Task Force Forum recently held in Melbourne Museum?
That was amazing. I went to that. It was it's so good. Actually, no, we've kind of had a bit of a number of events this month actually, but on the cards, not that I can think of right now. Surely, but I can't think of one right now.
Thanks. Yeah, just one question, Christina. When do you use goats to control gorse?
Goats are brilliant for keeping the gorse pruned and maintained, so it'll keep it in a sort of state of suppression. They're great to bring on and crash graze that gorse, and they'll stop those apical shoots, which will then create flowers and seeds. So you can kind of maim it and prevent it from seeding that way. But they won't kill the gorse, and if you leave them on there too long, you'll cause other problems with the goats. But they're brilliant for preventing further seed bank additions, and you can get on top of it in different ways, maybe with goats.
And just one more question that I'm thinking of. So if you have a neighbor that you know, or someone in your community that is not doing the right thing and not controlling gorse, and you've tried all you could to convince them, so what is your next step?
Yep. So we often tell people to, well, obviously, as you first said, try to speak to them, email that neighbor or email that stakeholder and remind them of the need to be mindful of their obligations under that Catchment and Land Protection Act of 1994, or of remind them of the issues of fire that you're concerned about, and that it is a weed of national significance. But if all else fails, you can log the issue with that hotline, what is the 136 186. And actually also through that number, there's a program called the Good Neighbour Program. If the neighbour is actually Crown land and you're doing all you can to control gorse on your side, the Good Neighbour Program through DECA does deal with the private land, public land interface, and you may incite a project to deal with the gorse on that Crown land. So 136 186 is the number to call. Lodge it with your local biosecurity officer, and see that they can take that from there. But do write to your, or speak to the people as well first.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Dan. So I hope that we answered all the questions tonight. We finished in really good timing. And I'm not sure if you have another slide after this, Christina, with some information, but I do, yeah. I was just that Gavin just gave us a last question. So they've got a solid 3 acres of 2 meters, so very tall gorse next door. And I don't think they listen. Oh, that was a comment. Yeah, that's right. There will always be some neighbors that or are not aware, or they haven't been pushed to do anything. But yeah.
I was just going to add something, Anna, too, just to people out there too, who've got kids, etc. There are some activities for Agriculture Victoria to help, you know, I believe, breed up biosecure, you know, biological controls and release them locally too, if that's an option, or, you know, through your local school groups or environmental groups to do too. Yeah,
that sounds really, really good. I'm really, really thankful to Dan and to Christina for this partnership in developing this flyer and the webinar tonight, and especially to everyone that came tonight and shared a bit of your time with us. Have a good night, everyone, and I'll see you next time.